Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, Kristen, do you feel like that being part of Voices was your turning point?
Yeah, I just like they forced us all as part of the like employment programming to sit through like an information session about how you get money for college. They took us on tours of the U of A campus and the Pima campus, and like had guest lecturers from like the journalism department who've won like international awards for their work. They had us going to the Center for Creative Photography and meeting like
I think we're exposed to a lot more
yeah,
academia and people in different professions, and
right.
especially in the art and literary world that we wouldn't have otherwise in the high school education aspect, in the community college aspect. I mean, it's if you didn't go out and look for it.
Right. So, like in high school, I avoided all those workshops that were available, and I didn't, because I didn't see myself in college. I didn't go to Pima just to look at it. I didn't know that there were lecture series going on at Pima or the U of A, and Voices was like, all right, well, instead of like working on your stories today, we're going to go do this at the U of A. We're going to go do this at Pima. And it was stuff we were interested in. Like, we were employed to be photographers, researchers, writers, interviewers, and it was like the stuff that we were going to see at Pima and the U of A was related to all that. So I was like, oh my God, like I felt like it was a connection to this community of people that were interesting to me that I had no idea existed. Like,
Oh, I remember when we went to the exhibit for the Creative Center of Photography, and we saw that girl. It was a photo essay about girl culture. And I remember us talking, like you had told me, like, what do you think about them? And I'm like, dude, it's a bunch of girls. And you're like, no, what do you really think about them? And they had like chola girls, they had prissy girls, like all in their own environment. And I remember like one of those, like that experience, like working there, and then us being like these active,
like we could critique like
yeah.
professionals. Yeah, that was definitely a turning point where I felt like I had been educated enough, like through this program, in just like I don't know, the tenets of photography or whatever, to be able to critique someone who was like, you know, one of the best photographers in the country. And I was like, talking to the other kids in the program, like, I don't feel like this is like as great as everybody thinks it is. And then our photography director, like, noticed our conversation and was like, well, why don't you talk to Lauren Greenfield about her photo essay? And I was like, what? Why would I tell her that I don't think she's the greatest thing since sliced bread? So we talked to her, and she said, like, oh yeah, the critique was that she was calling it girl culture, and yet she had these very stereotypical representations of low-income people and people of color, and that her main focus was on what I thought was the stereotypical white rich girl who has eating disorders, who's caught up in the debutante society, all these things. So I said, like, you know, if you're calling it girl culture, why aren't you showing like a diversity in girl culture? And she was like, well, this is my personal like representation of the society I grew up in, where minority people weren't a big part of my life, where all these things were represented. So this is my thing, my representation. So if your reality is different, you need to go document your reality. So like that was definitely a turning point, because I don't know, I saw that I could be part of like a dialogue with other artists, that I could be part of a community of people that were interested in contributing their work to like greater society. And I felt like for the first time, like I had been given the tools to do that. Like I felt like getting out of high school that I had just, whatever, filling out my application to college, I was like, wow, I'm pretty normal. Like there's nothing really outstanding about me. But like being able to get into like the real world and work and get my stuff, my photography and my writing published, I felt like I had learned enough about myself to understand like the direction that I wanted to go and what I could get out of college. And I feel so much more focused on like why I'm in school than a lot of my peers, because I know what the end result what I want the end result to be. And I know that, like, being in college and completing the assignments and, like, establishing relationships with my teacher, like, it has the potential, like, to get me further in my life. Whereas if I was someone who's just going to college to do it, like, I might not take it as seriously, and I feel very invested just because it seems like now everything matters.
I feel like now we've learned how to challenge, people, challenge our educators now, now that we know enough about ourselves or the direction that we want to go in, where that wasn't an option before because we didn't know how to.
Well, yeah, it's like the switch has been flipped. Like, we have the experience of working with adults who knew to push us until we cried.
Well, not just that, but, like, college-educated adults that made us understand, like...
people we found credible.
Yeah, that, and, like, I was never made to feel that just because I didn't have a college education, like, I wasn't smart enough. Like, they were college-educated people, and we were having conversations, that educated people have, like, to me, it was a big deal that I was recognized with someone with a college degree to tell me, like, you're smart enough, like, you could be going to college and expanding on your skills and expanding on this knowledge that you have and challenging and learning and growing for yourself. Like, why aren't you doing this? And I feel like that was another part of me wanting to go to college, that I felt worthy enough to do that, that I could question people, I could question my educator's words before, like, if I wasn't working toward that, like, I didn't feel like a person enough to do it, like, good enough to be questioning, like, who are you? You're no one, you're not a student, you're not learning, you're not growing, you're just in the same flow. Like, but now, pursuing that education and having the passion and drive for it, I feel like I have all the credibility in the world to do so, and even more so once I accomplish it.
Well, and I think
that goal.
that comes a lot from being in an environment where, like, we weren't just treated like the student who's, like, gonna absorb all this information. Like, I felt like we both had that privilege of being in an environment where, like, people with more skills were, like, telling us that we had these stories to tell and that we had these ideas inside of ourselves that we were going to, like, learn how to articulate by gaining this skill set of photography, this skill set of journalism. And I felt like, for me, that was, like, flipping it from, like, a vessel being filled up with knowledge to, like, someone who is able to, like, drive their own education, to drive their own learning. And I feel like for the first time I could see myself, like, taking advantage of college and, like, using college to learn what I wanted to better myself, and that I wasn't just going to be a passive student who gets a degree and then uses it, but that I was, like, going to use the knowledge I learned to fill myself up, to do something for myself.